This poor girl asked a millionaire and his daughter for a plate of food, but unfortunately she was humiliated and the millionaire's daughter spit in her face. But the worst happens when the girl pulls out something hidden and commits a terrible act. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The rain lashed against the streets of Willow Creek that October afternoon, turning the sidewalks into small streams. Under the awning of one of the town's most upscale restaurants, Lily, a girl of only 6 years old, clutched a handful of soggy paper flowers to her chest. Her hazel eyes, large and expressive, anxiously watched the hurried passers-by, some casting pitying glances, others simply ignoring her. Her small fingers, already calloused from folding paper, trembled not only from the cold rain, but from the fear of returning home once again without enough money to buy her mother's medicine. Cecilia, at 35, was growing weaker each day, consumed by an illness that no doctor at the free clinic could quite explain. "Ma'am, would you like to buy a flower? It's just $5, Lily rehearsed softly, as her mother had taught her. "They're pretty. I made them myself." The sound of a luxury car parking nearby caught her attention. From the vehicle burst a tall man in an impeccable suit, Theodore Ted Mendelsohn, 47, owner of the largest supermarket chain in the region. She didn't know who he was, but she noticed how the people around seemed to shrink in his presence. Soon after, a girl of approximately 11 years old hopped out of the car, shielded by an umbrella held by a woman in uniform. Lily took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. This was her chance. Rich people usually had money to spare, right? Maybe they could pay more than $5 for a flower. With hesitant steps, she approached the trio heading towards the restaurant entrance. "Sir, ma'am, would you like to buy a flower? They're very pretty." Her voice came out tremulous, almost a whisper. Ted didn't even look in her direction, but his daughter, Olivia, stopped. For a moment, Lily felt a glimmer of hope as she saw the older girl examine her paper flowers. "Look, Dad, what a ridiculous thing," Olivia sneered. "Who would want to buy these wet paper flowers?" Lily's heart sank, but she persisted. "Please, ma'am, it's to buy medicine for my mom." That's when it happened. With a quick and deliberate motion, Olivia leaned over and spat in Lily's face. The spit mixed with the rainwater running down the younger girl's face, who stood paralyzed in shock and humiliation. "Mister, your daughter, she spit in my face," Lily said through tears, looking at Ted in search of some justice. The businessman, who had observed the scene with indifference, merely chuckled. "Come on, Olivia, don't waste your time on these types of people." Something inside Lily broke at that moment. It wasn't just the humiliation of the spit, nor the cruel laughter of the rich girl. It was the accumulation of days seeing her mother waste away in bed, without the medicine that cost more than they could scrape together in a month. It was the desperation of going hungry to save every penny. It was the exhaustion of waking up before sunrise to make paper flowers and returning home late at night, often without selling any. With trembling hands, Lily reached for the small, rusty kitchen knife she carried to cut the flower stems. It wasn't a big or scary knife, it was just a work tool as worn as her hopes. But when she raised it, pointing it in the direction of Ted and his daughter, the world seemed to freeze. "You can't treat people like this." Her childish voice came out choked with sobs and anger. "My mum is dying, and you laugh at me." Ted's face paled, not from the threat itself. After all, it was just a child holding an old knife. But from what he saw in her eyes. It was a look he knew well, that haunted him in nightmares he tried to forget. It was the look of someone who had reached their limit, who had nothing left to lose. The nanny screamed for help, pulling Olivia back. In a matter of seconds, security guards from the restaurant appeared, and soon the police were called. Lily didn't resist when they took the knife from her hand. She was too exhausted to fight, too empty to feel fear. As she was led away by a social worker who arrived at the scene, Lily could only think of her mother, alone at home, probably worried about her delay. The paper flowers lay scattered on the ground, trampled and destroyed by the commotion, just like her dreams of being able to help her mother. Ted watched the girl being taken away, feeling something he couldn't explain. It wasn't just guilt or compassion, it was a deep discomfort, as if that little drama he had just witnessed had unearthed memories he had spent decades trying to forget. "Let's go, honey," he said automatically, guiding Olivia into the restaurant. But his appetite had disappeared, replaced by a feeling of unease that he knew wouldn't be easily dispelled. Outside, the rain continued to fall, slowly washing away the remains of the paper flowers. In the sky, dark clouds gathered, foreshadowing an even greater storm, not only in the sky of Willow Creek, but in the lives that fateful encounter had just intertwined in an irreversible way. The office of the Child Protective Services was a small, stuffy room with peeling walls and a ceiling fan that spun lazily, barely moving the heavy air of that afternoon. Lily was sitting in a chair too big for her size, her feet dangling without reaching the floor, while the social worker, Mary Carmody, a 58-year-old woman with graying hair and kind eyes, tried to establish a dialogue with the girl. "Honey, I need you to tell me where your mother is," Mary insisted for the third time, but Lily kept her lips firmly closed, her eyes fixed on the floor. It wasn't stubbornness. It was fear. Fear that they would take her mother away, as had happened to her friend Janine from down the street, whose mother had been admitted to a distant hospital, leaving the girl to live with relatives she didn't even know. Outside the room, Cecilia fought against her own weakness to remain standing. She had walked almost 2 miles since she learned from a neighbor that her daughter had been taken away by social workers. Each step was a battle against the dizziness and pain that consumed her body, but the fear of losing Lily was stronger than any physical discomfort. "My daughter. I need to see my daughter," she pleaded at the reception desk, her weak voice barely audible. Her face was pale, marked by deep, dark circles, and her hands trembled visibly. When Mary came out of the room and saw Cecilia, her heart, as an experienced professional, clenched. In her 30 years of social work, she had seen many mothers in vulnerable situations, but something in that woman's gaze touched her deeply. Mommy," Lily's cry cut through the air when she spotted Cecilia through the half-open door. In seconds, the girl was clinging to her mother's legs, sobbing. "Calm down, my love, calm down," Cecilia tried to soothe her daughter while struggling to stay on her feet. "Mommy is here." It was at that moment that Cecilia staggered, her legs giving way beneath her weight. Mary rushed to support her, helping her to sit in a nearby chair. "Ma'am, you need a doctor," Mary said urgently, noticing the cold sweat that covered Cecilia's forehead. "No, I can't," Cecilia replied between difficult breaths. "The medicine already costs everything we have. I can't afford a consultation." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Ted Mendelsohn sat in his luxurious office, trying to focus on the financial reports of his supermarket chain. But the words danced before his eyes, always turning into the image of that little girl with the rusty knife. "Mr. Mendelsohn?" The voice of his driver, Josiah, a 62-year-old man who had worked for the family for over 2 decades, interrupted his thoughts. "Your daughter is crying in the car. She doesn't want to go into school." Ted sighed heavily. It was the 3rd time that week that Olivia had refused to go to class. Since the incident with the flower girl, his daughter was different, quieter, more frightened, having frequent nightmares. "Cancel my morning appointments," he ordered, standing up. On the way to the car, he remembered his own childhood, the times when his father, Arthur Mendelsohn, built the family empire at the cost of practices he preferred not to recall. Olivia was huddled in the back seat of the luxury car, her impeccable school uniform contrasting with her tear-stained face. "She's going to hurt me, Dad," Olivia whispered when Ted got into the car. "The girl with the knife, she's going to come after me." "Nobody's going to hurt you, Princess," Ted tried to reassure her, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. How to explain to a privileged child the desperation he had seen in that girl's eyes? Josiah watched the scene through the rearview mirror, his heart heavy with memories of his own daughter, who had grown up in circumstances so different from Olivia's. He knew the neighborhood where the little flower seller lived well. It was the same place where his daughter had been born and raised before she got a scholarship that changed her life. "Sir," Josiah began hesitantly, "if I may, maybe little Olivia needs to understand why that child acted that way." Ted cast an irritated glance at his driver through the mirror, but something in the older man's words struck him. He remembered his own mother, Eleanor, and how she always said that fear comes from misunderstanding. Back at Child Protective Services, Mary Carmody faced a dilemma. The rules were clear. A child found in a situation of risk, carrying a weapon, should be temporarily removed from their guardians until a complete investigation. But looking at Cecilia, so obviously ill and yet fighting with all her strength not to be separated from her daughter, she knew that following the protocol to the letter could cause more harm than good. "Do you have any relatives who can help?" she asked, seeking an alternative solution. Cecilia shook her head negatively. "I only have Lily," she replied with a weak voice. Since he passed, it's just the two of us." Lily, who had not left her mother's side, raised her eyes with a wisdom beyond her years. "I promise I'll never pick up the knife again, Mom. It was just because that rich girl spit on me and her father laughed. My mom needs me." Mary felt her heart clench even more. In her years of service, she had learned to identify when a child was being sincere, and there was something in Lily's silent dignity that deeply moved her. It was at that moment that Mrs. Juniper, the retired nurse who lived next door to Child Protective Services, entered the room. At 70, she was known in the neighborhood for her knowledge of herbal remedies and for her willingness to help those in need. "Mary Carmody," she called from the door. "Excuse the intrusion, but I couldn't help but overhear. Maybe I can help." The social worker knew Mrs. Juniper well, a respected woman in the community who had already welcomed several families in vulnerable situations. Her simple but always clean and organized house was a safe haven known to everyone in the neighborhood. "I have a spare room," Mrs. Juniper continued, approaching Cecilia and observing with experienced eyes the symptoms the woman presented. "And I know some herbs that can help with these tremors while we seek proper treatment." Mary felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. It was a temporary solution, yes, but it would allow mother and daughter to stay together while she further investigated the situation and sought help from available social programs. "Would you agree to spend a few days at Mrs. Juniper's house?" she asked Cecilia. "It would be a way to keep Lily with you while we take care of your health and resolve this situation." Before Cecilia could answer, a strong dizziness made her stagger again. This time, not even Mary's arms were quick enough to prevent her from sliding off the chair, semi-conscious. "Mom! Mommy!" Lily's desperate cry echoed through the room, while Mrs. Juniper was already mobilizing to call an ambulance. A few miles away, in the private practice of Dr. Simone, 38, Ted Mendelsohn waited with his daughter. The doctor, known for her humanized approach and specialization in child psychology, was one of the few professionals he truly trusted. "Olivia needs to understand that that girl is not a monster," Simone explained firmly. "She is just a scared child, as your daughter is now." Ted started to respond, but was interrupted by the insistent ringing of his cell phone. It was Josiah. "Sir?" The driver's voice sounded urgent. I just found out that the flower girl's mother took ill at Child Protective Services. She is being taken to the municipal emergency room." For a moment, Ted hesitated. It wasn't his problem, he repeated to himself, but then he looked at his daughter, still scared and confused, and made a decision that would change the course of many lives. "Josiah, find out which hospital she is being admitted to, and don't tell anyone that you passed me this information." The Willow Creek Municipal Emergency Room was an old and poorly maintained building with peeling walls and an air conditioner that worked precariously. In the crowded waiting room, Lily held her mother's cold hand, who was lying on a gurney in the hallway, awaiting treatment. Beside her, Mrs. Juniper maintained a silent vigil, her experienced eyes assessing every change in Cecilia's condition. "She needs urgent care," Mrs. Juniper murmured to Mary Carmody, who had accompanied the ambulance. The social worker nodded, heading once again to the triage desk, where an overworked nurse tried to organize the line of patients. At that moment, an unusual movement caught everyone's attention. Ted Mendelsohn entered the emergency room, his impeccable suit completely out of place in the environment. Beside him, Josiah carried a briefcase. The businessman paused for a moment, his gaze scanning the place until he found the small group gathered around Cecilia's gurney. "What's he doing here?" Mary Carmody whispered to Mrs. Juniper, who simply pursed her lips in response, instinctively placing herself between Lily and the newcomer. Ted approached with determined steps, but something in his demeanor had changed since the knife incident. There was an unease in his eyes, a shadow of something that could be guilt or recognition. "The patient will be transferred to St. Luke's Hospital," he announced without preamble, handing some papers to the triage nurse. "Everything is already arranged." St. Luke's Hospital was the most modern medical institution in the region, frequented only by Willow Creek's elite. A murmur of surprise ran through the waiting room. "We don't need your charity," Mrs. Juniper spoke up, her voice firm despite her age. "This girl and her mother need justice, not handouts." Ted stared at the old woman for a moment, something in the dignity of her posture reminding him of his own mother, Eleanor. "It's not charity, Mom, it's a debt I'm paying." Before anyone could question the meaning of those words, a medical team from St. Luke's Hospital arrived with an appropriate gurney to make the transfer. Amidst the commotion, Lily didn't let go of her mother's hand, her big eyes alternating between Cecilia's pale face and Ted's imposing figure. "Are you going to hurt my mom?" she asked suddenly, her voice small but clear. "Like your daughter. Hurt me?" The businessman felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Those simple words, spoken with the cruel honesty that only children possess, struck him more deeply than any threat with a rusty knife. "No, little one," he replied after a moment of hesitation. "I'm trying to fix something that shouldn't have happened." At St. Luke's Hospital, Dr. Simone awaited the patient's arrival. She had received an urgent call from Ted, asking her to personally take on the case. The doctor was intrigued. She had known the businessman for years, since the days when he was still a young idealist doing his medical residency before abandoning medicine to take over the family business. When Cecilia was finally settled in a private room, the tests began immediately. Lily refused to leave her mother's side, even when the nurses gently tried to take her to get a snack. "My daughter," Cecilia murmured in a moment of lucidity, her voice weak but determined. "You need to go with Mrs. Juniper. Mommy will be okay." "I don't want to leave you alone," Lily replied, the tears she had held back for so long finally beginning to fall. It was at that moment that Josiah, who was watching the scene from the door, had an idea. He approached Ted, who was in the hallway, talking to Dr. Simone. "Sir," he began hesitantly, "my house is just a few minutes from the hospital. My wife Teresa would love to take care of the girl while her mother recovers. That way, she could visit every day." Ted considered the proposal. He knew Teresa, Josiah's wife, a 60-year-old woman known for her kindness and her talent for storytelling. More importantly, he trusted the judgment of his driver, who had long been more than just an employee. Dr. Simone, who had remained silent, finally spoke. The girl's emotional stability is just as important as her mother's physical recovery. She needs a safe environment, but she also needs to maintain the bond. While the adults discussed the arrangements, inside the room, Mrs. Juniper had taken from her bag a small bottle containing a herbal tea. "This will help with the pain," she explained to Cecilia, mixing a few drops into the IV drip. "It's an old recipe, passed down through generations. It won't cure you, but it will give you comfort while the doctors figure out what's going on." Cecilia accepted the natural remedy with gratitude. There was something in Mrs. Juniper's calm presence that brought peace to the sterile environment of the hospital. In the hallway, Ted received a call that made him pale. It was Olivia, in tears, saying that she had discovered through a schoolmate that the knife girl was in the same hospital where her grandmother Eleanor had spent her last days. "Dad," Olivia's voice trembled on the phone. "The girl, she draws just like Grandma Eleanor. I saw the drawings she made on the paper flowers. They're the same as the ones Grandma used to make on the cards she sent me." Ted felt the world spin for a moment. His mother, Eleanor, had been a recognized local artist, known for her delicate drawings of flowers. She had succumbed to a mysterious illness years ago after spending a lot of time working on social projects in the poorest neighborhoods of Willow Creek. "How do you know about the drawings?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I saved one of the paper flowers," Olivia confessed. After I... Dad, I did a very bad thing, didn't I?" The sincerity in his daughter's remorse touched Ted deeply. It was the first time Olivia had shown true awareness of the impact of her actions. At that moment, Dr. Simone came out of the room with a worried expression, holding the first results of Cecilia's tests. "Ted," she called urgently, "we need to talk. There's something in the tests, something that reminds me a lot of your mother's case." The businessman felt a chill run down his spine. The coincidences were beginning to accumulate in a way that he could no longer ignore. Inside the room, oblivious to the discoveries that were beginning to unfold, Lily had taken a piece of paper and a pencil offered by a nurse. Her small fingers moved with surprising skill, tracing the delicate outlines of a flower that grew in the hospital garden, visible through the room's window. "Mommy," she whispered, showing the drawing to Cecilia, "when you get better, I'll teach you how to make paper flowers too, but now I'm just going to do it on paper, okay? No knife." Cecilia smiled weakly, her eyes filling with tears as she saw her daughter's natural talent manifesting even in the most difficult moments. It was the same gift that her former boss, a kind lady who had passed away years ago, used to demonstrate while decorating the hospital hallways with her flower drawings. What none of them knew yet was that that simple drawing was about to unearth long-guarded secrets, connecting lives in ways that no one could predict. And as night fell over Willow Creek, bringing with it the promise of a heavy storm, fate began to weave its invisible threads, intertwining past and present in a design as complex as the flowers that Lily loved to portray so much. Josiah and Teresa's house was a small two-story house in the Sunnyside neighborhood, with walls painted light yellow and a backyard where mango and cherry trees grew. Teresa had prepared the guest room with all the care, placing clean sheets with flower patterns and a small dresser where Lily could store her few clothes. "This will be your home for now, little one," Teresa said softly, helping Lily settle in. The girl was exhausted after spending the whole day at the hospital, but her eyes still carried that characteristic determination. "Can I leave the window?" Open, Lily asked timidly, because at home I always saw the stars before going to sleep. Teresa smiled, remembering her own daughter, now a teacher in Phoenix, who had the same habit when she was little. Of course you can, and look what I've set aside for you. From an old drawer, Teresa took out a set of colored pencils and a notepad. Josiah told me you liked to draw. These were my daughter Mariana's when she was your age. Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of the drawing materials, but soon her expression turned serious. I need to save the paper for when my mom needs to sell the flowers again. Teresa's heart clenched at those words. A 6-year-old child shouldn't carry such adult worries. You don't need to think about that now, dear. Your mother is being well taken care of, and you can draw as much as you want. Meanwhile, at St. Luke's Hospital, Dr. Simone was hunched over Cecilia's tests in her office. Ted paced back and forth, his restlessness evident in every movement. The symptoms are identical, Simone said finally, spreading old and new tests on the table. The same progressive muscle breakdown, the same altered blood markers. It's exactly what your mother presented in the initial stages. Ted stopped his nervous pacing, leaning heavily against the wall. How is this possible? My mother's illness was never properly diagnosed. Doctors said it was something extremely rare. And it is, Simone confirmed, adjusting her glasses as she studied another report. But there's something here that intrigues me. Your mother used to work with social projects, didn't she? Especially in the poorest neighborhoods. Yes, Teddy replied, a shadow passing over his face. It was her passion. Even when my father opposed it, she continued. She said art could transform lives. At that moment, Josiah knocked softly on the office door. Excuse me, doctor. I have some information. That may be important. The driver entered, carrying an old yellowed folder. I found this in the files of the old hospital, where Mrs. Eleanor did her volunteer work. Cecilia, she worked there as a cleaner at the time. Ted took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were employee records, and there it was. Cecilia Santos, hired as a cleaning assistant in 2015. In the photo attached to the file, a younger Cecilia smiled shyly at the camera. She knew my mother, Ted murmured, the pieces beginning to fall into place. That's why Lily's drawings. She must have learned from my mother. Simone picked up another document from the folder, her eyes widening as she read the content. Ted, look at this. It's a report on cleaning products used in the hospital at that time. Some of them were banned products, highly toxic. Impossible, Ted shook his head. My father would never allow. Not your father, Josiah interrupted softly. But Mr. Rogers would. The name hit Ted like a punch. Rogers had been his partner in the early years, after medical school, when they dreamed of revolutionizing the local health system. But Rogers had betrayed him, fleeing with a large sum of money earmarked for social projects. Rogers was responsible for hospital purchases at the time, Josiah continued. He bought cheaper, prohibited products to increase profits. Your mother found out and started investigating, especially after some cleaning staff began to exhibit strange symptoms. In the private wing of the hospital, Cecilia woke up from a restless sleep. Beside her, Mrs. Juniper continued her silent vigil, her wrinkled hands preparing another dose of herbal tea. "Where's Lily?" Cecilia asked, her voice hoarse. "She's safe in the house of good people," Mrs. Juniper replied, helping her drink the tea. "That family, the Josiahs, they're simple people, but with big hearts." Cecilia relaxed a little. Upon hearing that, she knew Josiah by sight from the time she worked at the hospital. He always had a gentle smile and a friendly word for all the employees, regardless of their position. "Mrs. Juniper," Cecilia called after a moment of silence. "Do you remember Mrs. Eleanor? The artist who taught drawing classes to the children in the neighborhood?" The elderly lady adjusted herself in her chair, her eyes shining with recognition. How could I forget? She was an angel, that woman, always worried about others, always trying to help. She was the one who taught me about herbal remedies. She taught me to draw, Cecilia confessed, tears streaming down her pale face. During lunch breaks, when I cleaned her studio at the hospital, she would call me to sit down and draw with her. She said I had a natural talent. Mrs. Juniper took Cecilia's hand in hers. And that's why you taught Lily. Yes, Cecilia smiled, weakly. But not just that. Mrs. Eleanor was investigating something at the hospital, something about the cleaning products we used. She said they were dangerous, that they were hurting the employees. Then she started getting sick too. Her words were interrupted by a violent coughing fit. Mrs. Juniper quickly called the nurse, while in the hallway, hurried footsteps indicated that more people were arriving at the room. At the Josiah's house, Lily had fallen asleep over her drawings. Teresa covered her affectionately with a light blanket, watching the papers scattered on the small table. They were drawings of flowers, each more delicate than the other, with a line that closely resembled the works of Eleanor Mendelssohn that still decorated some walls of the hospital. The phone rang downstairs, and Teresa went down to answer it. It was Olivia, Ted's daughter, asking if she could visit Lily the next day. "I don't know if it's a good idea, girl," Teresa replied gently. "After everything that happened, please." Olivia's voice trembled. "I need to apologize, really, and I want to show her something that belonged to my grandmother." Teresa hesitated, looking at the stairs that led to the room where Lily was sleeping. The girl had already suffered so much, but there was something in Olivia's voice that sounded sincere, almost desperate. "I'll ask her tomorrow," Teresa decided finally. "If she agrees, you can come. But first, I need to know, what do you want to show her?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before Olivia answered. "Grandma Eleanor's last. Her drawing notebook. There's something written in it, something about a disease and about a cleaning lady she was teaching to draw. I think she was trying to tell us something important." Teresa felt a chill run down her spine. The connections that were beginning to form were too frightening to be just a coincidence. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about flowers and angels drawing stars. Night fell over Willow Creek, and with it, a growing sense that great revelations were about to happen. At the hospital, Ted stared at the old documents with a mixture of horror and understanding. In his pocket, his cell phone vibrated with a message from Olivia about his mother's drawing notebook. And somewhere between the starry sky and the drawings of a 6-year-old girl, long-buried truths began to find their way into the light. Morning arrived in Willow Creek, bringing with it the heat typical of the region. At the Josiah's house, Lily woke up early, as she always did. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing the room, but soon the memories of the previous day returned. The hospital, her sick mother, Teresa, and Josiah's kindness. She got up silently and went to the window. The backyard below was illuminated by the rising sun, and the mango and cherry trees cast interesting shadows on the ground. Without much thought, she took the notepad and pencils that Teresa had given her and began to draw. That's how Teresa found her an hour later, completely absorbed in her work. The drawing showed not only the trees, but also small details that most children wouldn't notice. The texture of the leaves, the pattern of the shadows, even a small spider that had spun its web among the branches. "Lily," Teresa called softly, not wanting to startle her. "Breakfast is ready, and there's someone who wants to talk to you." The girl raised her eyes from her drawing, immediately tense. "Who?" "Olivia, Mr. Mendelssohn's daughter," Teresa replied, carefully observing the girl's reaction. "She wants to apologize to you, and she has something important to show you." Lily was silent for a long moment, her fingers unconsciously tightening around the pencil she was holding. Is she going to spit on me again? The question, asked with a mixture of fear and defiance, broke Teresa's heart. No, honey, she's really sorry. But if you don't want to see her, that's okay. The decision is yours. At the hospital, Cecilia was having a difficult morning. The pain had worsened during the night, and not even Mrs. Juniper's tea seemed to help. Dr. Simone was by her side, adjusting the intravenous medication while studying the new tests. Mrs. Juniper, Cecilia called in a weak voice, did you bring that herb that Mrs. Eleanor always used, the one from the foothills? The elderly lady, who was organizing her herbs on a small table, stopped abruptly. How do you know about that herb, girl? Mrs. Eleanor taught me. She said it was special, that it only grew in certain places, that it helped with tremors and weakness. Dr. Simone, who had begun to pay attention to the conversation, approached interested. What herb is that? It's one we call Creek's Tear, Mrs. Juniper explained. Very rare nowadays. Eleanor was one of the last people who knew all its uses. She was studying this plant, saying it had unique properties to combat certain types of poisoning. Poisoning? Simone repeated, her eyebrows rising. Did she leave any notes about that? There was a notebook, Cecilia murmured, her eyes closing, with the effort of remembering. She always carried a notebook where she drew the plants and made notes. On the day she last got sick, she was writing something important in it. In Ted's office, the businessman was having a tense conversation on the phone with his lawyer. I need all the hospital's purchase records from the time when Rogers was responsible, he insisted. And I also want to know where he went after he disappeared with the project money. Josiah, who was organizing some documents in the room, cleared his throat discreetly. Sir, if I may, there's a person who might be able to help. The old hospital gardener, Mr. Johnson. He still lives in the Sunnyside neighborhood near my house. He was very close to Mrs. Eleanor. He took care of the garden where she collected the herbs for her studies. Ted hung up the phone and stared at his driver. Why haven't you mentioned this before? Forgive me, sir, Josiah replied calmly, but until yesterday you had never shown interest in knowing more about your mother or what happened at that time. The words hit Ted like a slap. It was true. After his mother's death, he had completely shut himself off, immersing himself in business and ignoring anything that might bring painful memories. At the Josiah his house, Lily finally agreed to see Olivia, but with one condition. The meeting would be in the backyard, where she felt safer, surrounded by the trees she had just drawn. Olivia arrived accompanied by Clarice, her nanny. The rich girl looked different now. There was no more arrogance in her posture, just an evident nervousness, and something that looked a lot like shame. Hi, Olivia said timidly, holding an old box against her chest. I brought something for you to see. Lily didn't answer, just watched as the other girl approached and sat on the backyard bench, leaving a considerable space between them. Teresa and Clarice watched discreetly from the porch. This was my grandmother's notebook, Olivia explained, opening the box carefully. She drew just like you. And look. From inside the notebook, she took out a drawing that made Lily hold her breath. It was a flower drawn with the same style, the same delicate lines that she herself used in her drawings. How did you learn to draw like that? Olivia asked softly. My mom taught me, Lily replied, her voice just a whisper. She said she learned from an angel who drew flowers at the hospital. Olivia flipped through a few more pages of the notebook until she came to a series of notes. My grandmother, she wrote about a cleaning lady she was teaching to draw, and about some dangerous plants, some products that were hurting people. The girls were interrupted by a commotion coming from the house. Josiah had arrived with news from the hospital. Cecilia was having another crisis. I need to see my mom. Lily jumped up, but before she could run, Olivia grabbed her arm. Wait! "There's something here that can help your mom," she exclaimed, frantically turning the pages of the notebook. "My grandmother wrote about a special plant that helped with tremors and weakness. She kept seeds of that plant in the hospital garden." An elderly voice completed the sentence. It was Mr. Johnson, the former gardener, who had arrived with Josiah. In the small greenhouse behind the old building, Mrs. Eleanor had a special patch there where she grew the creek's tear. At the hospital, Dr. Simone struggled to stabilize Cecilia, while Mrs. Juniper murmured old prayers, her wrinkled hands clutching a worn rosary. It was then that Ted burst into the room, followed by Mr. Johnson. "Is the greenhouse still there?" he asked the gardener, who nodded. "It's abandoned, but the plants, some survived. Mrs. Eleanor said they were special, that they took care of themselves. She kept a diary with all the medicinal properties, all the discoveries she made." "The diary is here," Olivia's voice sounded from the door. She had arrived with Lily, still holding the old notebook. Grandma wrote everything: how to use the plants, how they could help people who had been exposed to toxic chemicals. "Doctor," Simone took the notebook with trembling hands, her eyes quickly scanning the detailed notes. This is incredible. They are complete studies on herbal medicine applied to cases of intoxication by industrial cleaning products. Your mother was a scientist, Ted, a scientist who was far ahead of her time." In the bed, Cecilia opened her eyes, her gaze meeting Lily's. The girl ran to hug her mother, her small hands holding hers tightly. "Mommy, we found the flower angel's medicine," Lily whispered. "You're going to get better." But while hope began to blossom in that hospital room, outside, a figure watched everything through the hallway window. It was a middle-aged man wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. His face was tense, worried. He had recognized Eleanor's notebook, and he knew that its secrets were about to come to light. Rogers adjusted his tie, quickly thinking about his next steps. He couldn't allow those old discoveries to come to light. There was too much at stake, too much money, too many powerful people involved. With a last look at the room where the truth was beginning to reveal itself, he walked silently down the hallway, his cell phone already in his hands, ready to make some important calls. The afternoon sun beat down on the old abandoned greenhouse behind St. Luke's Hospital. Mr. Johnson walked among the half-wild flower beds, accompanied by Ted, Dr. Simone, and Mrs. Juniper. The place was different from how the gardener remembered. The glass walls were dirty and some broken. Vines had taken over much of the metal structure, and most of the beds were covered with weeds. "It was here," Mr. Johnson pointed to a more protected corner of the greenhouse. "Mrs. Eleanor kept the most special plants in this area. She said the afternoon sun was important to them." Mrs. Juniper approached the indicated flower bed, her experienced eyes examining the vegetation that grew seemingly chaotically. "It's still here," she murmured with admiration. "The creek's tear has survived all these years." It was a small, discreet plant, with delicate leaves of a grayish-green and tiny white flowers that looked like dewdrops. Any ordinary person would pass by it without noticing anything special, but Mrs. Juniper could already feel its unique energy. "We need to be very careful when harvesting," she instructed. Eleanor always said that the plant needed to be harvested with respect at specific times. While the adults were busy with the plants, in the hospital room, Lily and Olivia were sitting together, hunched over Eleanor's notebook. Teresa had brought colored pencils and paper, and the girls copied some of the drawings while Cecilia rested. "Your grandmother drew so beautifully," Lily commented, her fingers delicately tracing the outlines of a flower in the notebook. "Just like my mom taught me." Olivia observed the natural skill with which Lily reproduced the lines. "You draw just like her. I never managed to draw like that, even when she tried to teach me." "Sometimes," Lily began hesitantly, "when I'm drawing, it doesn't feel like it's me. It's like someone is guiding my hand." In the hospital reception area, Clarice, Olivia's nanny, was filling out some forms when she noticed a man in a suit watching the movement suspiciously. Something about him bothered her. Perhaps it was the way he seemed especially interested in the hallway that led to Cecilia's room. At the same moment, in the office of his mansion, Arthur Mendelsohn, Ted's father, received a disturbing call. "They found her notebook, Arthur." Roger's voice sounded tense. "And the greenhouse, they're there now. If they find out everything—" "Calm. Down," Arthur interrupted, his voice as cold as ever. "Nothing has been proven in all these years, and nothing will be proven now. Take care of it." Back at the greenhouse, Dr. Simone was fascinated by the notes in Eleanor's notebook. It's incredible. She documented every step of her research. The effects of the plant on different types of intoxication, the dosages, the harvesting times, and the warnings, Mrs. Juniper added, pointing to a specific page. About the chemicals that were being used in the hospital. She knew they were dangerous. Ted felt a tightening in his chest as he read his mother's notes. Her handwriting, normally so elegant, showed signs of tremor in the last pages. Something is wrong. The same symptoms appear in several cleaning staff: tremors, muscle weakness, intense pain. The products are not what they should be. Someone is switching the packaging, using prohibited substances. I need to document everything, gather evidence. "Mr. Mendelsohn," the urgent voice of Josiah interrupted the reading. The driver had arrived hastily at the greenhouse. "There's something you need to see. I just found it in the old storage archives." Josiah held out a yellowed folder. Inside, there were old invoices, all signed by Rogers, showing the purchase of cleaning products from a company that didn't officially exist. "That's not all," Josiah continued. "I found correspondence between your father and Rogers. They knew about the irregular products. It was a scheme to save money, even knowing the risks." Ted felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His own father, all that time. In the hospital room, Cecilia woke up startled. She had dreamed of Eleanor again, as often happened. In the dream, her former boss showed her a drawing of a flower and said, "The cure is in the details, dear. Observe the details well." "Mom?" Lily realized that she had woken up and ran to her side. "Look what I drew for you." It was a portrait of Eleanor made from a photo in the notebook, but Lily had added something. In the background of the drawing, almost imperceptible, were small symbols that looked like letters. "Where did you see those symbols, honey?" Cecilia asked, suddenly alert. "I don't know. They appeared in the drawing on their own," Lily replied, confused, "as if my hand knew what to do." Olivia, who was watching the scene, quickly picked up her grandmother's notebook and began to flip through it frantically. "Here!" she exclaimed. "Grandma used those same symbols in the corners of some drawings. They look like a code." At that moment, Clarice entered the room in a hurry. "There's a strange man prowling the hallway," she whispered. "He's trying not to draw attention, but it's the third time he's passed by here." Teresa, who had returned with a snack for the girls, frowned. "I saw him earlier too. He was talking on the phone and seemed very nervous." At the greenhouse, Dr. Simone had begun to prepare the first infusion with the Creek's tear, carefully following the instructions in Eleanor's notebook. Mrs. Juniper supervised every step, ensuring that everything was done exactly as it should. "Eleanor knew," the elderly lady murmured as they worked. "She knew that one day someone would need these plants again. That's why she left everything documented. That's why she kept the greenhouse running even when they tried to close it." "How did they try to close the greenhouse?" Ted asked, still shaken by the discoveries about his father. "It was just before she got sick," Mr. Johnson replied. "Mr. Rogers came with a demolition order, said the space would be used to expand the parking lot. But your mother didn't allow it. She had documents, evidence of something. She used that to prevent the demolition." "What kinds of documents?" Dr. Simone asked, her attention divided between the conversation and the preparation of the remedy. "I'm not sure exactly," the gardener replied. "But she kept something important in a special place. She said it was her life insurance." Back in the room, Lily continued producing drawings as if her hands had a life of their own. In each one, the same mysterious symbols appeared, forming patterns that seemed to tell a story. "Look," Olivia pointed out, comparing the drawings with the pages of the notebook. "These symbols, they change according to the plants that Grandma was studying, as if each plant had its own password." Cecilia watched everything with a mixture of admiration and concern. She remembered Eleanor, making similar notes, always with such care and precision. At the time, she didn't understand the importance of those details. Now, she was beginning to realize that her former boss was building something much bigger than simple botanical studies. In the hallway, the mysterious man made another pass, this time stopping briefly to look through the small window in the door. His gaze met Lily's for a moment, and the girl felt a chill run down her spine. "Aunt Teresa," she called softly. "I've seen that man before. The day my mom started feeling sick at the old hospital. He was there, talking to other men in suits about cleaning products." Teresa and Clarice exchanged worried glances. Something was happening, something bigger than any of them could imagine. And at the center of everything, a little girl who drew flowers seemed to be the key to unraveling a mystery that had begun long before she was born. Night had fallen over Willow Creek, bringing with it a warm breeze. In the hospital room, Cecilia was taking the first doses of the infusion prepared with the creek's tear. Mrs. Juniper administered the remedy carefully, strictly following the instructions in Eleanor's notebook. "It's bitter," Cecilia commented after the first sip, a surprised expression appearing on her pale face. "But there's something familiar. It reminds me of the tea that Mrs. Eleanor used to prepare for us, the cleaning staff at the end of the shift." Lily, who didn't leave her mother's side, continued drawing. Her latest drawings had become more complex. They weren't just flowers now, but also maps of what seemed to be the old hospital, with small symbols marking specific locations. "Look, Dad," Olivia called to Ted, who had just returned from the greenhouse. "Lily's drawings, they show places, and look at this in Grandma's notebook." She opened the notebook to a specific page, where Eleanor had made a similar map with the same mysterious symbols. On the margin of the page, there was an almost erased note. "The vault is where the roots meet the stars." "What vault is that?" Ted murmured, more to himself than to the others. "I know." Mr. Johnson, who had quietly entered the room, exclaimed. Mrs. Eleanor always spoke in code when referring to the place where she kept her most important documents. She said that the roots and the stars only meet in one place in the hospital. "The greenhouse," Mrs. Juniper completed, her eyes shining with understanding. "The special patch where she grew the creek's tear. It's exactly under the broken skylight, from where you can see the stars at night." In the hallway, Clarice watched the movement attentively through a crack in the door. The mysterious man had disappeared, but something in her gut told her that he wasn't far away. Teresa, who had gone out to fetch some of Lily's belongings from her house, returned agitated. "There's a black car parked on the corner near the hospital," she informed in a low voice. "Two men in suits are inside watching." Ted felt his heart race. He knew that modus operandi well. That's how his father used to deal with problems in business. "Josiah," he called to his driver, who was near the door. "Take the girls to your house, now." "I don't want to go," Lily protested, clinging to her mother's hand. "I need to finish the drawings. It's important." Cecilia, who seemed strangely more alert after taking the infusion, held her daughter's face in her hands. "My love, you need to go. But before, she took one of Lily's drawings and turned it over, beginning to write something on the back with a shaky hand. Mrs. Eleanor taught me more than drawing. She taught me to observe, to keep important secrets. On the last day, she showed me something that needed to be protected. "What did she show you, Mom?" Lily asked, her big eyes fixed on Cecilia's face. "A special place in the greenhouse, under the main flower bed. There's a compartment. She made me memorize the exact location. She made me promise that I would only reveal it if it was really necessary." Dr. Simone, who was checking Cecilia's vital signs, noticed a significant improvement in her heart rate. The infusions seemed to be taking effect faster than they expected. "The documents that Mr. Johnson mentioned," Ted concluded, "the evidence that my mother used to prevent the demolition of the greenhouse." "It's not just documents," Cecilia continued, her voice gaining strength. "It's samples of the original products and the adulterated products. Mrs. Eleanor collected evidence for months, recorded everything. She knew she was in danger, but she couldn't allow them to continue poisoning innocent people." In the hospital parking lot, Rogers got out of his car, accompanied by two men of intimidating appearance. His phone vibrated. It was Arthur Mendelsohn again. "Resolve this today." The voice of the Mendelsohn patriarch sounded cold on the other end of the line. "Use the necessary means, but end this story." Inside the room, the girls finally agreed to go with Josiah, but not before Lily finished one last drawing. It was the most detailed of all. It showed the exact location in the greenhouse where, according to her mother, Eleanor had hidden the evidence. "It's like she's guiding my hand again," Lily explained as she drew, "like someone really wanted us to find something important." Olivia, who had become inseparable from Lily in the last few hours, added her own touches to the drawing, reinforcing certain details that her grandmother always included in her works. "Grandma always said that the truth is in the details," she commented, "that we need to look carefully to see what's really important." While Josiah took the girls out the back of the hospital, accompanied by Teresa and Clarice, Ted, Dr. Simone, and Mr. Johnson prepared for a nighttime expedition to the greenhouse. Mrs. Juniper would stay with Cecilia, continuing the treatment. With the creek's tear infusion, "Be careful," Cecilia called to Ted before he left. "Rogers, he's not alone in this. There are powerful people involved, people who don't want the truth to come out." Ted nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. It wasn't just about discovering the truth now. It was about doing justice, about honoring his mother's memory and protecting innocent people like Cecilia. On the way to the greenhouse, crossing the dark gardens of the hospital, Ted couldn't help but think about how his life had changed in just a few days. From a businessman focused only on profits and numbers, he now found himself following in his mother's footsteps, seeking a truth that could destroy not only his family's reputation, but an entire system of power and corruption. What none of them knew was that Rogers was already in the greenhouse, his hands trembling as he rummaged through the flower beds, desperately looking for the hiding place that Eleanor had created years ago. In the dark, the symbols that Lily had drawn shone softly on the folded paper in his pocket, a copy that he had managed to make during one of his rounds through the hospital hallway. The stars shone through the broken skylight, casting mysterious shadows on the plants that had survived time and neglect. Somewhere, between the roots of the creek's tear and the night sky, the truth awaited to be discovered. The Josiah's house was silent, except for the soft scratching of pencils against paper. In the guest room, Lily and Olivia sat on the floor, surrounded by drawings. Teresa watched the girls from the door, amazed at the transformation that had occurred between them, from enemies to confidants in a matter of days. "Something's wrong," Lily murmured, frustrated, looking at her latest drawing. "There's a part of the map missing," Olivia flipped through her grandmother's notebook frantically, comparing the pages with Lily's drawings. "Here!" she exclaimed suddenly. "Grandma made a different mark on this page. It looks like a math problem." On the yellowed margin of the notebook, numbers and symbols formed a seemingly meaningless sequence, but for Lily, something in those numbers seemed familiar. "They're steps," she said, her eyes shining with the discovery. "My mom always counted steps when she cleaned the hospital. She said that Mrs. Eleanor taught her to do that, so she would never get lost, even in the darkest corridors." In the hospital greenhouse, Ted, Dr. Simone, and Mr. Johnson advanced with flashlights, following the map drawn by Lily. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and plants. "Stop!" Mr. Johnson whispered suddenly, grabbing Ted's arm. "Someone's here." On the other side of the greenhouse, a faint light moved between the flower beds. Rogers, his hands dirty with earth, continued his frantic search. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cool night, and his movements were increasingly desperate. "It's over, Rogers." Ted's voice cut through the silence, causing the man to freeze. "We know everything." Rogers straightened up slowly, a bitter smile on his face. "Do you really, Ted? Do you know how your father built this whole empire? Do you know how many people had to suffer so you could have your privileged life?" At the hospital, Cecilia was experiencing a surprising improvement after the third dose of the infusion. Mrs. Juniper watched in amazement as the color returned to the patient's face, as her tremors gradually decreased. "It's a miracle," murmured the nurse, who came to check the vital signs. "No," Mrs. Juniper corrected softly. "It's knowledge. Knowledge that was almost lost, that some people tried to bury along with their dirty secrets." At the Josiah his house, the girls had spread all the drawings on the floor, forming a large map. Clarice, who had studied architecture before becoming a nanny, noticed something interesting. "Look," she pointed out, "if we overlay the drawings in a specific way, following these numbers on the margins—" "It's a sequence," Olivia completed excitedly. "Like a recipe, only with places instead of ingredients." Lily took a new paper and began to draw quickly, her small fingers moving with surprising precision. This time, they weren't just flowers or maps. They were specific symbols, organized in an order that seemed to make sense only to her. "My mum used to sing a song," she explained as she drew. "When she cleaned the hospital, she said that Mrs. Eleanor taught it to her, that it was important never to forget." And then, to everyone's surprise, Lily began to sing softly, "Where the roots touch the sky, where the moon kisses the ground, 15 steps to the north, 7 to the heart." In the greenhouse, Rogers had pulled something from his jacket. No, not a gun, but a vial. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It's a sample of what we used to use, of what they still use in hospitals across the country. Cheaper, more efficient, and completely illegal." "That's why my mother started investigating," Ted said, taking a step forward. "She found out what you were doing." "Your mother was a foolish idealist," Rogers exploded. "She didn't understand how the world really works, how much money we could save, how much profit we could generate. At the cost of innocent lives." Dr. Simone interrupted, her voice full of contempt. "People like Cecilia, who just wanted to work honestly." In the girls' room, Lily had finished her last drawing. It was different from all the others. It showed a tree whose roots intertwined with stars, forming a pattern that resembled a lock. "The key!" Olivia exclaimed suddenly, running to grab her grandmother's notebook. Grandma always wore this star-shaped pendant. She said it was her key to the sky. Teresa and Clarice exchanged worried glances. The girls' discoveries seemed too important to be kept just there. "We need to warn your father," Teresa told Olivia, already grabbing her phone. But before she could make the call, a commotion in the street caught her attention. 2 dark cars had parked in front of the house. To the basement, Teresa whispered, her maternal instinct speaking louder. Now! In the greenhouse, the tension increased. Rogers held the vial as if it were a weapon, his eyes moving frantically between Ted, Dr. Simone, and Mr. Johnson. You don't understand, he continued, his voice taking on an almost pleading tone. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone, it was just business. Business? Ted advanced, his voice trembling with anger. My mother lost her life because of your business. It was then that a soft melody cut through the air. It was Ted's cell phone ringing urgently. On the screen, Teresa's name flashed insistently. In the basement of the Josiah's house, Lily and Olivia huddled in a dark corner, protected by Teresa and Clarice. Eleanor's notebook was safe between them, along with all the drawings they had made. The song, Lily whispered suddenly, her eyes widening in the darkness. The song my mum used to sing. It wasn't just a song, it was a map. And while the girls rediscovered long-hidden truths, in the greenhouse, under the starry sky that shone through the broken skylight, a silent battle was about to reach its climax. A battle not for power or money, but for the truth that Eleanor had protected with her own life. The basement of the Josiah's house was small but cozy, used mainly to store preserves and provisions. Teresa had transformed the space into an improvised refuge, lighting a small lantern that cast soft shadows on the exposed brick walls. The song, Lily repeated, her voice just a whisper. My mom sang it when she was nervous, especially when she cleaned near Dr. Rogers' office. With trembling hands, the girl took a new paper and began to write the lyrics, each verse revealing more than just a simple ditty. Where the roots touch the sky, where the moon kisses the ground, 15 steps to the north, 7 to the heart. Under the star that does not shine, next to the flower that has no color, the old truth is kept in the garden of lovelessness. Olivia, who was looking over Lily's shoulder, quickly grabbed her grandmother's notebook. Look, Grandma used symbols that looked like musical notes in the margins of some drawings. They aren't real notes, they're numbers. Upstairs, heavy footsteps echoed. Someone was inside the house. Teresa and Clarice exchanged apprehensive glances, instinctively positioning themselves in front of the girls. At the hospital greenhouse, the situation was increasingly tense. Rogers still held the vial with the toxic product, his face contorted into a mask of despair and bitterness. You don't understand, Ted. He continued, taking a step back. Your father. He wasn't different from me. In fact, it was his idea from the beginning. What are you talking about? Ted demanded, feeling his heart tighten. The cleaning products were just the beginning. Rogers let out a humorless laugh. Arthur had bigger plans. He wanted to expand the scheme to the entire hospital network. Your mother, she discovered everything by accident. Dr. Simone, who had remained silent, analyzed the situation with clinical eyes. She observed how Roger's hands were trembling, how his face was covered in sweat, even on the cool night. You're sick too, she stated suddenly. The same symptoms as Cecilia, aren't they? The tremor in your hands, the excessive sweating. Roger seemed to shrink at the observation. Ironic, isn't it? I spent so much time handling those products. I thought I was being careful, but at the hospital, Cecilia had fallen asleep after taking another dose of the infusion. Mrs. Juniper took the opportunity to examine the latest tests with renewed attention. It's as Eleanor always said, she murmured to herself. Nature has its own justice. A noise in the hallway made her look up. Arthur Mendelssohn, imposing in his expensive suit, was standing in the doorway. How is she? He asked with an artificial formality. Do you really care? Mrs. Juniper retorted, her old eyes fixed on his. In the Josiah's basement, Lily had started, drawing again, but this time it was different. Her strokes were more urgent, almost frenetic. It's a safe, she explained as she drew. Mrs. Eleanor hid something important inside it. Something that scared some big people a lot. "How do you know that?" Teresa asked softly. "My mom told me without meaning to," Lily replied, focused on her drawing. One night, when she had a high fever, she kept repeating, "The safe, the safe." Eleanor kept everything in the safe. Olivia, who had memorized every page of her grandmother's notebook, found a specific note. "The real treasure is not what's inside the safe, but what it represents. The truth, once planted, grows like wildflowers." Wild and inevitable. The footsteps upstairs got closer. Teresa turned off the lantern, plunging everyone into complete darkness. At the greenhouse, Mr. Johnson had quietly approached the special flower bed while Rogers spoke. His experienced gardener's fingers touched the earth with reverence. "Mrs. Eleanor," he murmured so softly that only Dr. Simone, who was nearby, could hear. "Forgive me for not protecting your garden better." At that moment, Ted's cell phone vibrated again. It was a message from Olivia. "Dad, Lily found out where the safe is. It's under the creek's tear, but you need the song to open it. The key is Grandma's pendant." Rogers, noticing Mr. Johnson's movement, took a staggering step towards the flower bed. "No, you can't. There are things that need to stay buried." "Like your guilt?" Ted advanced. "Like the poisoning of innocent people, like the truth about my mother's illness." At the hospital, Arthur stared at the sleeping Cecilia with an indecipherable expression. "She looks like her, doesn't she?" Mrs. Juniper commented. "Like Eleanor, the same silent dignity, the same inner strength." "You don't know anything," Arthur replied sharply, but something in his eyes betrayed a deeper emotion. "I know more than you imagine," the old woman replied, calmly. "Eleanor told me everything before she passed. About how you were different in the beginning, how you really wanted to help people before you let money corrupt your soul." In the basement, the girls had gathered all the clues, the drawings, the song, the symbols from the notebook. "It's a puzzle," Olivia whispered, excited despite the fear. "Grandma turned everything into a big puzzle to protect the evidence." "But why?" Clarice asked, keeping her eyes fixed on the basement door. "Because she knew," Lily replied with a wisdom beyond her years. "She knew that one day someone was going to need to know the truth, someone who could see the flowers beyond, the thorns." At the greenhouse, Mr. Johnson had begun to dig gently around the creek's tear. His hands knew that earth, knew its secrets. "It's here," he announced suddenly, his fingers touching something solid under the soil. Time seemed to freeze. Rogers, with a desperate movement, tried to approach, but his legs faltered. The vial with the toxic product slipped from his hand, rolling across the concrete floor. "Don't open it!" he pleaded, falling to his knees. "You don't understand, Ted. Your father, he will face the truth," Ted completed firmly, "just like all of us." And as the night progressed, long-buried secrets were beginning to emerge, bringing with them not only painful truths, but also the possibility of healing, both for the poisoned bodies and for the souls marked by guilt and remorse. The safe was smaller than they expected, a metal box the size of a large book, covered with a layer of earth and rust. On the lid, a complex locking mechanism stood out, with carvings that formed the drawing of a star. "The pendant," Ted murmured, remembering Olivia's message. "We need my mother's pendant." Dr. Simone approached Rogers, who was still on his knees, trembling visibly. "You need medical attention," she stated, her professional instinct speaking louder than any resentment. "It's too late for me," Rogers replied with a bitter smile. "But maybe it's not too late to fix some things." With trembling hands, he took from his jacket pocket a small velvet package. Inside, a star-shaped pendant shone softly under the light of the flashlights. "I took it from her neck," he confessed, his voice choked. On the last day, I thought I might need it, that I might find what she had hidden." In the basement of the Josiah His house, the girls continued putting together the pieces of the puzzle left by Eleanor. Lily had drawn the mechanism of the safe with surprising precision, as if she could see it clearly in her mind. "The song," she explained, humming softly. "The numbers are the positions to turn the star. 15 to the north, 7 to the heart. Like a combination lock," Olivia completed excitedly, despite the tension of the moment. "Grandma turned the song into a combination." Teresa and Clarice remained alert. The footsteps upstairs had ceased, but the silence was almost more frightening than the noise. At the hospital, Cecilia woke up startled, finding Arthur Mendelssohn still standing near her bed. Mrs. Juniper remained as a silent guardian by her side. "I remember you," Cecilia spoke, her voice stronger after the treatment with the creaks. "Tear. From the day you kicked me out of the hospital when I tried to show you the medical reports of the employees who were getting sick." Arthur maintained his impassive expression, but his hands, hidden in the pockets of his expensive suit, clenched into fists. "You don't understand," he began, but Cecilia interrupted him. "No, you're the one who doesn't understand," she said with surprising calm. "Mrs. Eleanor understood. She saw beyond the money, beyond the power. She saw the people." At the greenhouse, Ted held his mother's pendant, memories of his childhood flooding his mind. He remembered her wearing that star every day, even when she was sick. How didn't he realize at the time that it was more than just an ornament? "The combination," he said, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "I need to call Olivia." But before he could make the call, a familiar voice sounded. From the entrance of the greenhouse, "That won't be necessary." Everyone turned around. Arthur Mendelssohn was standing in the doorway, his imposing figure silhouetted against the faint light of the hallway. Behind him, to everyone's surprise, was Cecilia in a wheelchair, accompanied by Mrs. Juniper. "The girls figured it out," Cecilia announced, her voice carrying a renewed strength. "The song, the symbols. Eleanor left everything prepared for this moment." In the basement, Lily had finished another drawing. This time, it was a portrait of Eleanor holding her star-shaped pendant. But there was something different about this drawing. "Look," Olivia pointed out, "the reflection in the pendant shows numbers." Teresa approached to see better, impressed with the level of detail in the little artist's drawing. "How can you see all that, Lily?" "It's not me," the girl replied simply. "It's like Mrs. Eleanor is showing me, helping me draw." At the greenhouse, Arthur slowly approached the group gathered around the safe, his eyes fixed first on Rogers, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few minutes, then on the pendant in his son's hands. "Eleanor always said that the truth finds its way," he spoke, his voice carrying an emotion that no one there had witnessed before. "Like the roots of wildflowers which cross the hardest earth to find water." "Dad," Ted began, but Arthur raised a hand, asking for silence. "Let me tell you a story," he said, pulling up an abandoned chair and sitting down heavily. "The story of a young doctor who dreamed of building hospitals to help people, but who got lost along the way. The story of how money can poison a soul as easily as chemicals can poison a body." Mrs. Juniper, who had positioned Cecilia's wheelchair close to the group, began to prepare another dose of the creek's tear infusion. The gentle aroma of the medicinal plant filled the air of the greenhouse, mixing with the smell of freshly dug earth. In the basement, the girls had managed to recreate the complete sequence to open the safe. Lily hummed the song softly while Olivia wrote down the numbers. 15 north, the beginning of life. 7 south, where the heart dwells. 3 east, where the day is born. 9 west, where the stars fade. "It's a code," Clarice whispered, amazed. "Your mom turned a lullaby into a mathematical code." Teresa, who kept a keen ear for sounds, from the house, grabbed her cell phone. "We need to pass this information on to them." In the greenhouse, Ted's cell phone vibrated again, another message from Olivia with the complete sequence of numbers. He looked at the pendant in his hand, then at his father, who had stopped talking and was now observing the safe with an indecipherable expression. "It's time," Cecilia spoke softly. "Time to let the truth come to light, like wildflowers after the rain." Ted approached the safe, the pendant firm in his hand. In the silence of the greenhouse, only the soft sound of the breath of those present and the occasional clinking of Mrs. Juniper's medicine bottles broke the tension of the moment. The truth, kept for so long in the bowels of the earth, was about to emerge. Like the roots of the creek's tear, which survived neglect and time, some truths are too strong to remain buried forever. With the star-shaped pendant firmly positioned in the lock of the safe, Ted began to turn, following the sequence of numbers. Each movement was accompanied by a soft metallic click that echoed in the silent greenhouse. 15 to the north, he murmured, turning the mechanism. The pendant fit perfectly, as if it had been made especially for that moment. In the basement of the Josiah's house, Lily continued drawing frantically, her small fingers moving almost on their own across the paper. Teresa watched, fascinated, as the drawings seemed to tell a story, the story of Eleanor, of her discoveries, of her silent struggle for the truth. "Look!" Olivia pointed to one of the most recent drawings. "It's the lab where Grandma did her research, and these numbers in the margins, they look like chemical formulas." At the greenhouse, Arthur watched his son handle the safe with an expression that mixed apprehension and something that could be regret. "Eleanor discovered everything by accident," he began to speak, his voice loaded with painful memories. "She was doing her research with medicinal plants, trying to develop natural treatments for people who couldn't afford expensive medicines. That's when she started to notice the patterns." "What patterns?" Dr. Simone asked, while helping Mrs. Juniper prepare another dose of medicine for Cecilia and Rogers, who was now trembling visibly. "The cleaning staff began to exhibit similar symptoms," Arthur continued. "At first, we thought it was a coincidence. But Eleanor, she was always more observant than all of us. She started collecting samples, doing analyses." 7 to the south, Ted murmured, continuing the sequence on the safe. Another soft click echoed through the greenhouse. At the hospital, the night shift nurses commented on the surprising improvement of several patients who had received the creek's tear infusion. The case was beginning to attract the attention of the medical team. "It's like the plant knows exactly what to do," one of them commented, as if it had been created specifically to combat this type of poisoning. Back in the basement, Lily had stopped drawing abruptly, her eyes fixed on a distant point. "What is it, honey?" Teresa asked softly. "Mrs. Eleanor?" the girl replied in a whisper. "She wasn't just looking for a cure. She was trying to prove something about the bad people who hurt other people on purpose." At the greenhouse, the next movement of the safe, 3 to the east, was accompanied by a different sound, deeper. "When Eleanor confronted me with her discoveries," Arthur continued, his voice now weaker, I didn't want to see the money, the power. Everything seemed more important at the time. Rogers took care of the practical part. I just closed my eyes." Cecilia, from her wheelchair, observed the scene with a mixture of emotions. "Mrs. Eleanor showed me the documents," she revealed. "In the last week before she got sick, she said she had enough evidence to expose everything, but she wanted to give people a chance to do the right thing on their own." 9 to the west. Ted completed the sequence, and a final click, stronger than the previous ones, echoed through the greenhouse. For a moment, no one moved. The air seemed charged with electricity, with expectation. Then, with a soft metallic sigh, the lid of the safe opened. Inside, organized meticulously, was a set of documents, carefully labeled vials and a hardback notebook. But what immediately caught everyone's attention was a letter placed right on top with Eleanor's elegant handwriting. For when the truth finally finds its way into the light. In the basement, Lily had started drawing again. This time with even greater urgency. The drawing showed a woman, Eleanor, in her laboratory, surrounded by plants and documents. But there was something more in the drawing, something in the woman's eyes that conveyed a clear message. Hope. She knew, Olivia murmured, looking at the drawing over Lily's shoulder. She knew that one day someone was going to finish what she started. Ted took the letter with trembling hands, unfolding it carefully. His mother's voice, through the written words, seemed to fill the greenhouse. My dear son, if you are reading this letter, it means that the truth has finally found its way. Like the plants that know how to wait for the right time to bloom, some secrets need time to come to light. What you will find in this safe is not just a set of evidence about wrongdoing. It is the testimony of how greed can poison not only bodies, but also souls. And more importantly, it is proof that there is always a path to healing. The creek's tear is not just a medicinal plant. It is the result of years of research, of observation, of love for the traditional knowledge of our land. It has the power not only to heal the bodies poisoned by illegal chemicals, but to remind us that nature always finds a way to balance. Ted, my son, I know that you carry the same heart as I do, a heart that cares, that wants to make a difference. Don't let the world harden that heart. Use these discoveries not to punish, but to heal, to change, to rebuild. And remember, the most beautiful flowers are those that manage to break the hardest earth. The letter continued, but Ted needed to stop for a moment, his hands trembling too much to continue holding the paper. Dr. Simone gently took the letter from his hands, continuing the reading aloud, while everyone in the greenhouse, including Arthur and Rogers, listened in silence to the last words of a woman who had dedicated her life to the pursuit of truth and healing. Morning arrived in Willow Creek, bringing a soft drizzle, typical of late October. In the greenhouse, the group spent the entire night examining the contents of the safe. Each document, each sample, each note revealed more details of Eleanor's meticulous investigation work. She catalogued everything, Dr. Simone explained, spreading documents on an improvised table. Samples of the original and adulterated products, chemical analyses, records of symptoms, development of the treatment with the creek's tear. Cecilia, still in her wheelchair but visibly stronger after several doses of the natural remedy, observed Rogers, who had been accommodated on an improvised stretcher in the corner of the greenhouse. His tremors had decreased considerably after starting to receive the same treatment. It's strange, she commented softly, to see that even those who harmed us needed the same cure as us. At the Josiah Hees house, the girls had finally been convinced to sleep after Teresa promised to take them to the hospital as soon as dawn broke. Lily's drawings covered practically the entire floor of the room, forming an extraordinary visual narrative. I've never seen anything like it, Clarice commented, helping Teresa organize the papers. It's as if she can see through time, capture memories that she hasn't even lived. In the center of the kitchen table, Eleanor's notebook was open to a specific page, showing the initial development of the creek's tear. The plant has unique detoxification properties. Its ability to neutralize harmful chemicals seems to be linked to a natural process of adaptation to the contaminated soil. It's as if nature itself has developed an antidote. Arthur Mendelsohn remained in the greenhouse throughout the night, sitting silently in a corner, watching as his empire of lies crumbled before his eyes. But unlike what everyone expected, he had not tried to stop anything, had not made threats or tried to hide evidence. Eleanor was right, he spoke finally, his voice hoarse after hours of silence. About everything, about how money can poison a soul as easily as chemicals can poison a body. Ted, who was studying some financial documents found in the safe, looked up at his father. "Why, Dad? Why did you let things get to this point?" "It started small," Arthur replied, running his hand over his tired face. "Some changes to the cleaning products to save money. Then, when we realized how much we were profiting, it became easy to justify. It's just a little cheaper product, we said. No one will notice." "But they noticed," Mrs. Juniper intervened, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "The plants noticed, the bodies noticed, and Eleanor noticed. And when she found out," Rogers spoke from his stretcher, his voice weak but clear, "we panicked. She had too much evidence, too much knowledge. The plan was just to scare her, make her give up the investigation. But she didn't. Give up," Ted completed, feeling a mixture of pride and pain when thinking about his mother. At the Josiah's house, Lily woke up startled, running to her drawing table even before the sun rose completely. Her small fingers moved urgently over the paper, creating an image that seemed to sprout directly from her dreams. "What are you drawing?" Olivia asked sleepily, waking up with the movement of her friend. "The secret garden," Lily replied without taking her eyes off the paper. "Mrs. Eleanor didn't keep the plants only in the greenhouse. There was another place." The drawing showed a small garden, hidden between the old hospital buildings, a space protected by high walls where various species of medicinal plants grew freely. In the center of the garden, a special area was dedicated to the cultivation of the creek's tear. Back at the greenhouse, Dr. Simone had organized the evidence into categories: financial documents, medical records, chemical samples, and most importantly, the entire development of the natural treatment. "This is not just about exposing a criminal scheme," she explained to the group. "It's about a revolutionary medical discovery. The creek's tear is not just an antidote for these specific cases of poisoning. It has the potential to treat various types of chemical intoxication. And that's why she documented everything so meticulously," Mr. Johnson added, caressing one of the plants with affection. "It wasn't just about proving the crime, it was about ensuring that the cure survived." Cecilia, who had been quiet for some time, suddenly straightened up in her chair. "The seeds!" she exclaimed. "Mrs. Eleanor didn't keep all the seeds here. She had another place." "The secret garden," Ted murmured, vaguely remembering a hidden green space where his mother spent hours when he was a child. At that moment, Teresa arrived at the greenhouse with the girls. Lily ran immediately to her mother, while Olivia hesitated for a moment before approaching her father. "Dad," she called softly, "Lily drew something that you need to see." The drawing of the secret garden passed from hand to hand, each person recognizing different elements. Mr. Johnson identified the species of plants. Mrs. Juniper noticed the specific planting patterns for medicinal herbs. Dr. Simone perceived chemical symbols discreetly incorporated into the drawing. "That's where the original seeds are," Cecilia explained. "Mrs. Eleanor showed me once, made me promise to keep it a secret. She said it was our guarantee that the cure would never be lost, even if something happened to her." Arthur rose slowly from his chair. "I know where it is," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of guilt and determination. "And I know what we need to do now." All eyes turned to him, waiting. The man who had allowed greed to corrupt his heart now looked different. Smaller, perhaps, but also more human. "We need to do what Eleanor always wanted," he continued. "Not just expose the truth, but ensure that her discovery helps the people who need it. It's time to turn poison into a cure, as the creek's tear itself does." And so, as the sun rose, in the sky of Willow Creek, A small group prepared for a last journey, no longer in search of buried secrets, but towards a future where truth and healing could finally bloom freely. The secret garden was hidden in a small valley between two old hospital buildings, protected by high walls covered in vines. Arthur guided the group through a narrow path that few knew, stopping before a rusty iron gate. "Eleanor spent hours here," he said, his voice loaded with memories. "I used to argue with her for wasting time with useless plants instead of participating in the hospital board meetings." The gate opened with a creak, revealing a space that seemed to have been preserved by time. Despite the years of neglect, the garden maintained its own organization, as if nature had taken over the role of gardener in Eleanor's absence. "It's exactly like in my drawing," Lily whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. Cecilia, now able to take a few steps with help, watched in amazement as the plants had survived and thrived. Mrs. Juniper moved through the garden with the familiarity of someone who knows each plant by name. "She organized everything in circles," she explained, pointing to the flower beds, "the stronger plants protecting the more delicate ones, like a family." In the center of the garden, a circular raised flower bed caught the attention. It was there that grew the largest concentration of Creek's tear they had ever seen, the small white flowers swaying gently in the morning breeze. "Look!" Olivia exclaimed, pointing to a stone near the central flower bed. Carved into the smooth surface were the same symbols that appeared in Lily's drawings and in Eleanor's notebook. Dr. Simone approached to examine the markings. "They're chemical formulas," she stated, surprised, "but they're not just about the composition of the plants. There's something more here." "They're recipes," Mr. Johnson completed, kneeling with difficulty next to the stone. "Mrs. Eleanor engraved here all the instructions for the cultivation and preparation of the remedies. She used symbols that would seem like simple decorations to those who didn't know how to read." Ted watched everything with a lump in his throat, remembering moments from his childhood in that same garden. How many times had he seen his mother working there without ever really understanding the importance of what she did? "There's more," Rogers spoke weakly, supported by Dr. Simone. The treatment with the Creek's tear was taking effect, but he still needed help to move. "Eleanor didn't keep just plants here. She had a laboratory," Lily completed excitedly, running to a small building almost completely covered by vines. "It's in my drawing too." The group followed the girl to the building. The door was locked, but Arthur, after a moment of hesitation, took an old key from his pocket. "I always knew she kept something important here," he admitted. "But I never had the courage to enter. Maybe part of me didn't want to face the truth." The interior of the laboratory was a testament to Eleanor's meticulous work. Shelves covered the walls, filled with carefully labeled vials, notebooks, and simple but efficient equipment for plant analysis and processing. "It's a complete herbal medicine laboratory," Dr. Simone explained, examining the equipment. "She could do detailed chemical analyses here, document every discovery, and keep evidence," Cecilia added, approaching a specially protected cabinet. "It was here that she showed me the samples of the adulterated products, the documents that proved the scheme." While the adults explored the laboratory, Lily had sat down in a corner, drawing frantically. Olivia watched over her shoulder, noticing how each new drawing revealed more details of Eleanor's work. "It's as if the garden is telling its story," Olivia commented, seeing the images take shape under Lily's skilled fingers. "It's not the garden," Lily replied without stopping drawing. "It's Mrs. Eleanor. She left clues everywhere, waiting for someone one day to understand." Teresa, who had remained close to the girls, noticed something interesting in the drawings. "Look at this. Each plant in the garden has a specific function. It's not just the Creek's tear. There's an entire system of combined treatment." "It's true," Mrs. Juniper confirmed, approaching to see the drawings. Eleanor always said that true healing comes from balance, from the right combination of elements, like a family where everyone has their role. Arthur, who had been examining some documents found in the laboratory, suddenly let himself fall into a chair, his face pale. "Dad?" Ted approached, worried. "She foresaw everything," Arthur spoke, his voice trembling. "Here are projects for a treatment center, a place where traditional knowledge and modern medicine would work together. That's what she wanted to do with the money that—" His voice failed. "The money that was diverted to buy illegal products," Rogers completed, the guilt evident in his voice. "We can still realize that dream," Dr. Simone intervened. "We have the plants, the formulas, all the knowledge that Eleanor left. And now we have something even more valuable. Proof that it works." She gestured towards Cecilia and Rogers, both recovering thanks to the treatment with the creek's tear. "It won't be easy," Ted pondered. "There will be resistance, people who won't want the truth to come out." "That's why we need guardians," Mrs. Juniper said firmly. "People who can protect and transmit this knowledge, like Eleanor did, like Cecilia did with Lily." At that moment, Lily stood up from her corner, holding a new drawing. It was different from all the others. It showed the garden not as it was, but as it could be, a spacious and welcoming space where sick people found healing, where children learned about plants, where knowledge flowed freely like water. "That's how it's going to be," she said, with the innocent certainty of children. "Mrs. Eleanor is showing the way." And as the sun rose higher in the sky of Willow Creek, illuminating the secret garden through the treetops, a plan began to take shape. A plan to transform poison into a cure, pain into hope, and secrets into knowledge that could help many people. Eleanor's secret garden, preserved for so long, was about to bloom in a way she had always dreamed of, no longer hidden between walls, but open to all who needed healing and hope. 6 months had passed since the discoveries in the secret garden. Spring had arrived, bringing with it an explosion of color and life. The old, abandoned land between the hospital buildings had been transformed into the Eleanor Mendelssohn Treatment Center, a space where modern medicine and traditional knowledge worked in harmony. Cecilia, completely recovered thanks to the treatment with the creek's tear, now coordinated the patient assistance program. Her mornings were dedicated to receiving people who, like her, had been affected by toxic chemicals. Her afternoons were reserved for teaching young researchers about the healing properties of plants. "Each person who comes here has a different story," she explained to a group of medical students as they walked through the expanded gardens. "But they all find the same welcome that Mrs. Eleanor once offered me." In the center of the garden, the original creek's tear patch had multiplied under the dedicated care of Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Juniper. The small white flowers now grew in abundance, providing enough raw material to meet the growing demand for treatment. "It's as if the plant itself knew that we needed it," Mrs. Juniper commented, her wrinkled hands delicately harvesting the flowers in the early hours of the morning. "More buds are born every day, more flowers." Lily, now almost 7 years old, had become a constant presence at the center. Her mornings were dedicated to school, a requirement that Cecilia insisted on maintaining, but her afternoons were spent in the garden, where she continued to develop her gift for drawing under the guidance of specialized teachers. "She has a unique talent for recording the plants," Dr. Simone explained during a presentation to the medical community. "Her drawings capture details that sometimes even our most modern equipment cannot record." Olivia, who spent every free moment with her friend, had developed an interest in botany herself. The two girls were often seen exploring the flower beds, Lily drawing, while Olivia made meticulous notes on the growth of the plants. "It's different from any friendship I've ever seen," Teresa commented with Clarice, watching the girls work together, as if one completes the other. Ted had completely transformed the management of the family hospitals. With the help of Dr. Simone, he implemented a rigorous quality control program in all the products used, in addition to creating a special fund for research in natural medicine. My mother always said that true healing comes from balance. He explained in meetings, between tradition and innovation, between nature and science. Arthur, after publicly confessing his involvement in the toxic product scheme, was now dedicated to assisting other health institutions to identify and eliminate similar practices. His experience, although born from past mistakes, was helping to prevent other people from being harmed. Rogers, after his recovery, chose to collaborate with the authorities, providing information that helped dismantle a national network of illegal chemical supply. His sentence was reduced in exchange for cooperation, and he now worked in the center's laboratory, using his knowledge in chemistry to study the properties of medicinal plants. On a particularly significant morning, the treatment center was preparing for a special event. It was the day of the first graduation of the class of young researchers in herbal medicine, a program created by Cecilia and Dr. Simone to train new guardians of traditional knowledge. The garden had been decorated with flowers, and in the center of the space, a special exhibition showed the evolution of Lily's drawings, from her first paper flowers to her most recent botanical studies. Each drawing tells a story, Olivia explained to the visitors, proud of her friend, not only of the plants, but of the people they helped. During the ceremony, Ted observed the transformation that had occurred not only in the physical space, but in the people. His father, sitting quietly in one of the last rows, had tears in his eyes. Cecilia, standing on the makeshift stage, radiated the confidence of someone who had found her true purpose. It was then that Lily got up to make a special presentation. With the help of Olivia, she had prepared a series of drawings that told the story of the center, from the first tense encounter with the rusty knife to that moment of celebration. Mrs. Eleanor left many seeds, the girl began, her voice small but firm, not only of plants but of love and hope. And as she always said in the drawings that she helps me make, some seeds need time to grow, but when they find the right soil, they bloom stronger than ever. The words of the little artist touched deeply all those present. Cecilia, unable to hold back the tears, hugged her daughter with pride. Ted held Olivia's hand, who had also gone up on stage to stand next to her. Friend. At the end of the ceremony, as people dispersed to get to know the garden better, Mrs. Juniper gathered a small group near the original creek's tear patch. Eleanor always said that each plant has its moment to bloom, she spoke, her voice full of wisdom. But the most important thing is not the flower itself, but what it represents. The promise that there is always hope, there is always healing, there is always a new beginning. And so, under the open sky of Willow Creek, the secret garden that once held so many pains and secrets had been transformed into a symbol of renewal and hope. The paper flowers that Lily sold on the streets had given way to real flowers, cultivated with love and knowledge. The rusty knife that once expressed despair had been replaced by instruments of healing and learning. But above all, the fear and distrust that separated people and social classes had been transformed into bridges of understanding and mutual respect. Like the roots of the creek's tear, which intertwine under the earth to strengthen themselves, the lives touched by that story had connected in deep and lasting ways. And in the center of everything, two girls, one who had once spat in contempt, another who had responded with a knife, now sat together in the garden, drawing and dreaming of a future where other stories of pain could transform into stories of healing and hope.